I spent 1 year on dating apps, and despite being a short Asian dude with average looks, I somehow ended up with a girlfriend who I love and inspires me. In this video, I condensed my 1 year experience with dating apps into the best stories and takeaways in hopes that you might increase your chances of finding your future partner. Let's begin. The first takeaway might be obvious, but after 1 year on dating apps, I learned that the most important quality people look for is personality. Said no one ever. Appearance is obviously the #1 thing that people are actually looking at, and quite frankly, as a short Asian dude at the height of 5'6", that definitely made things tough. Admittedly, shortness is one of my greatest insecurities and still kind of is. I'm doing my best to work on it, but growing up with parents who always told me that I needed to eat more, drink more milk, rollerblade to get taller and all that stuff, my dad even said to me, if you don't listen to me, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. And my mom always looked at me with a slight disappointment and would make a remark about my height at the same time. An acquaintance in college even blurted out why are you so short? And I'm like, what kind of question is that? But finally, the last slap in the face was when I was hanging out with some of my friends that are girls who were on dating apps, and they were showing each other matches and whatnot. And one of my friends said something along the lines of, "Ew, he's 5'6", skip." Although I know they're not talking about me, it still sucked to hear because the vast majority of girls probably also feel the same way. Luckily, there are some girls out there that value a lot of other things more, like actually personality and character, compared to just looks. With that takeaway pointed out, let's move forward. The second takeaway is that your mental state and how you approach the apps will affect your experience with the apps quite a lot. My advice is not to give it too much weight and emotional investment. As a little background, I'm someone who's had a girlfriend throughout high school and most of college, but after I graduated, I stayed single for a good long while. But eventually, family started bugging me about it quite a bit. That was a story of how I ended up using dating apps. While using the app, I was still doing my own thing and focusing on myself and my goals, while I occasionally went on dates. I only used Hinge at first since it's the most popular amongst my friends in California, and admittedly, I found it kind of fun. One of the big reasons why it was fun was because of my friends. They sometimes swiped for me and would try teaching me how to send good first messages by referencing something in their profile or one of their photos. So my advice is don't take it too seriously, but be ready to take it seriously if it goes there. Always state your intentions clearly throughout the process, and if you really are trying hard to seek a relationship, but it's not working out, my advice is to take a step back and focus on yourself while still trying to put yourself out there. Moving along, as a super summary of my experience with the apps, I met someone new about once a month in person. 9 were from Hinge and 2 were from Bumble, which I later downloaded about 10 months after I started using Hinge. Every person I met up with was pretty nice and every date went pretty well, except for one. In the first ever date I went on through a dating app, the girl showed up 30 minutes late, didn't thank me for paying for the food ahead of time, and then she told me she was moving away, out of the state, a week later. At least it was a decent conversation, but here's a tip for you guys: don't pay for the actual full meal unless it was a good experience. Otherwise, honestly, I feel like some people take advantage of that. Anyways, early on, there was a girl that I met that I enjoyed talking to a lot. We actually talked on the phone a lot before meeting up. And admittedly, I found her profile photos to be much more attractive than her real life self. This was pretty much the case for almost everyone I met up with other than 2 people, I'd say. And I think this is an important point. Appearance, like I mentioned before, is the most important attraction factor, at least in the beginning, and that goes both ways. Despite being someone who has lots of experience with video and photography, I chose to use photos that I took on my phone that weren't really professionally shot to give off a more natural look. What I found interesting is that my girlfriend actually told me that the first thought she had when she met me was that I looked better in person than on the apps. 2 other girls told me the same exact thing. But I'm not saying to use bad photos to set their expectations lower and then be better than expected, although I suppose that could work in some circumstances, but try to actually put effort into your profile photos. One of the girls I met through Hinge showed me the amount of matches and likes that she got on her dating apps, pretty early on, and it ranged from hundreds to thousands. That's insanity. There's just no way you're going to stand out unless you have a standout first photo. Better yet, just make your whole profile really good. And even if it's a photo of the best version of you or professionally taken or even slightly edited, just use it. Increasing your chances of at least getting a match first and then seeing if you guys fit together personality-wise and character-wise, that is a good first step. Anyways, back to my meeting with the girl. Despite her not looking as attractive compared to her photos, I still enjoyed our 2 dates. We ended up texting and talking on the phone a lot, but after a while, I told her that I wasn't quite feeling any romantic feelings. A part of me thought that perhaps I was just devoid of the ability to feel romantic feelings, but an extremely amazing travel trip to Singapore and Bali proved me wrong. I met someone there not from dating apps that had a very unique and beautiful personality. We ended up almost being in a relationship, but I didn't want to do long distance at the time. One thing to note is that she was the same height as me. I think it's because we met in person that it didn't matter to her as much, perhaps. I highly encourage you guys to try and meet people outside of the apps. That experience for me was significantly better than all the girls I met through Hinge. Although the 7th girl that I met through Hinge was quite special. We met up for dinner and I found her life story very, very impressive. She had a very confident and strong personality that I found attractive. So we went on a second date, played some billiards, and then had a very confusing hand-holding experience. I was walking next to her and there was like a lamppost in between us. So I stepped out of the way and then back towards her, and then the swing of my hand reached the bottom, and somehow her hand just slipped into mine. Like, no joke, it was just seamless, and I swear to God, I had zero intentions of holding her hand. But I asked her if it was like okay, if this is okay, and she said of course, otherwise she would have like pulled away, which implies it wasn't like her who initiated it unless she was trying to be sly. So the hand holding was initiated by nobody. That was a funny first. After that, we visited the beach together, hand in hand, where we talked about past relationships and what we sought in a partner. At this point, I definitely liked her. The first girl I actually liked through Hinge, and guess what she said she was looking for in a partner? Nothing. Nothing except for, I was hoping for someone taller. Followed by, I hope that doesn't hurt your feelings. I was less hurt and more disappointed. She really did seem like really cool and I did like her, but the fact that she doesn't have anything other than height that she's looking for was a huge letdown. We met up one more time for a total of 4 meetups, but ultimately, it just didn't work out. I learned that these encounters can sometimes be quite fickle, so definitely try to manage your expectations. I will say that I enjoyed our hangouts for the most part, but the ending definitely left a bad taste in my mouth. Skipping ahead, the last girl from Hinge before I deleted the app was someone I met in Japan. She was actually really cool, but it was definitely just friend vibes. She thanked me a whole lot for not being a weirdo, which kind of surprised me, because a different girl I met did something similar, where they avoided eating a meal for the first time, like the first part of the meetup, to test if I was like okay before eating dinner with me. And that's because she told me a previous experience where she got stuck with a dude who just didn't talk, like hardly at all. My advice is try practicing your conversational skills before you go on dates. Otherwise, it's definitely not going to go well. With the advent of ChatGPT's voice mode, you have basically no excuses. You can even ask ChatGPT to rate you and roleplay with you. Practicing some certain questions out loud could help a lot. Don't sweat it, you got this. Anyways, at the point that I went to Japan on the 10th month, I decided to try out Bumble since Hinge is pretty much dead in Japan. I met with one other girl who ended up being a cool friend, and then finally, I met with my now girlfriend. The first meetup was at Kyoto Station, and we had a meal and then walked around afterwards for about a good hour or 2. And we just talked. Although the premise of us meeting was just as friends and not a date, we gave each other like a warm hug 3 different times when saying goodbye, and eventually, with more time and meetups, that friendship became a relationship. And at that point, it was pretty much exactly 1 year from the point I downloaded Hinge, and now it's about 1 year after I met my girlfriend. Pretty crazy. And now here are some more takeaways from the experience. Firstly, despite being an average-looking short Asian dude, I was still able to go on dates using dating apps and eventually meet my girlfriend. And all I did was just be myself the entire time. And eventually I found someone who really values and loves who I am, which makes it very easy to be together with that person. I truly think that you can find great people through dating apps. My friends have done it, I've done it, it's just really hard sometimes. My advice is to expedite the matching process. A lot of girls would just choose based on appearance, so as long as you have a good profile, I wouldn't spend that much time looking through their profiles until there's a match. And if you're really not getting any matches, meeting people through friends, random events, and so on might be better. But I get that it's hard for some people to do that, so try to bring your conversation off the dating apps as soon as possible. Make the talking feel more real by having a phone call or a video call. I did that for 5 people and saved myself from having to meet one of them because there was a clear disconnect. I suppose I should also say that the first messages are important. After matching, I would usually start the conversation with something related to their profile and something interesting or unique that I could add to it. Conversations are generally more interesting when you add specificity and your personal takes or stories. Also, as a random and maybe obvious tip, don't waste your energy trying to make friends on dating apps. I always entered with a mindset that I can potentially be friends with people I met, but I discovered that it takes some pretty unique and interesting people to meet on a dating app and actually want to be friends afterwards. For instance, the girl that's looking for nothing but height called me after the 4th meeting and said that we should just be friends. And most people say that, but they actually don't mean it. So at a certain point, I just stopped believing it. Although she actually did reach out to me 6 months later while I was in Japan, saying that she wanted to hang out again, so maybe that's my fault for not following up. My final tip is to be genuine and show true interest in the other person by asking questions that let them tell their stories. And respond in turn by telling your own interesting stories. At the very least, even if it's not gonna work out with this person, you'll have a good conversation. And that was my 1-year story of using dating apps along with my best tips for you guys. But I'm curious, let me know what your dating app experience has been like and if you've had any success with it in the comments down below. Also, a message to those who happen to have the huge disadvantage of being a short dude like me: don't lose hope and keep trying. We can only do so much for our physical appearance, but if you keep working on yourself, that work will shine through to whoever you meet in the future, and eventually, you'll meet someone who values you for who you are and what you can do, rather than what you look like. Best of luck with your love life, subscribe and like if you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Peace.